Inflation is up 7.9%, a very scary number, not something I imagine going forward will stay that way. But what we want to understand is how can we make sure that we preserve our purchasing power so that we can retire and never run out of money. That's what today's video is going to be on. I'm going to share examples on exactly how we can do that and how we can invest to make sure we outpace inflation. As a reminder, I'm Taublieb, a financial planner, and I'm here to help you retire early. And so what we want to think through with inflation is not what's it going to cost today, but what's it going to cost in the future to make sure we never run out of money. There's an example I'm going to share in a moment to show how we do that. But first, think about what you want to spend in retirement. Some of you might be watching this video going, Ari, I'm years out from retirement. I don't even know what I'm going to want to spend, but I want to make sure I'm doing everything right to set myself up. Great, this is the video for you. Others might be saying, Ari, I'm a few years out from retirement, or I just really want to retire today. How can I make sure I'm invested appropriately to outpace inflation? This video is also for you. So let's hop into the example. Now, the example I'm going to share is someone is going to be age 60. Let's call them John. John is age 60. John has a 30-year retirement. So he's age 60 today. We're going to kill John off at age 90. I know, very mean of me. Now let's assume that he wants to spend $100,000 per year every year in retirement. In recent videos, you might have seen the retirement smile, which is while you have your health and energy, you tend to spend more, and then it drops off. And then expenses tend to go back up when there's things like medical expenses or giving, things like that. But $100,000 per year, let's just use that as a starting place. And now here's the power of inflation. 3% per year, that's the historical average. I know this year, 7.9%. Other years, below 3%, 1 or 2%. So 3% is the average. It's the conservative number I'm starting with. Well, if $100,000 per year, if that's your living expenses in the first year of retirement, in the last year of retirement, you can expect the $100,000 per year to have the same purchasing power as $240,000 per year. Otherwise said, that you need to make sure you're invested the right way to make sure you outpace inflation so that $240,000, really that's the equivalent of $100,000 in today's dollars. So how can you make sure you are invested the right way? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. But let's look at another example really quickly. Saying, what if it's not 3%? What if it's 4%? So once again, you're 60 years old. We're assuming you have a 30-year retirement, passing away at age 90. Well, now the cost of goods and services, the cost of inflation is going to make it go up by 325%. Meaning, if $100,000 per year of your living expenses in the first year of retirement, you can expect living expenses in the final year of retirement to be $325,000 per year, meaning that is the amount you need to simply maintain the same purchasing power of $100,000 per year in today's dollars. So that is what we are up against in retirement. Now, the way you win in retirement is by not losing. It's not about hitting home runs. It's making sure that you're not striking out and making sure you're hitting singles and doubles to get the return to outpace inflation. And so if 3% per year is what we're up against, or call it 4% in that second example, what we're planning for is not $100,000, but it's planning for $103,000, $106,000, $109,000, and growing on itself and compounding on itself, because compounding is a wonderful thing, but it works in both ways. It can help you grow, but it can also be a really big expense if we're not planning for it correctly or thinking about it correctly, is what I really should say there. And so what I want you to invite you to think about is when you're looking at retirement, can I be invested in the right way to outpace inflation, pay for taxes, and be adjusted for that inflation to end up with the equivalent of $100,000 per year every single year, so you don't have to sacrifice your standard of living? And so what I want to show you is, what are the different portfolios? What is that right mix to outpace inflation? You have enough to pay for your living expenses. So there's a balance there. How much in conservative investments? How much in investments that we need to grow for us? Well, one of the things to think through is, what is the right mix for you? Number one, does the market downturns really just cause you to not sleep at night? I'm touching my stomach here. Does it make your stomach hurt? Because if it does, we're defeating the purpose of financial planning. With retirement planning specifically, the two major risks, number one, you run out of money. Number two, you have to sacrifice your standard of living. So how can we avoid those altogether? If we're invested in a portfolio for maximum growth, 100% stocks, 0 bonds, it's going to be really great over time, but you're going to go through significant ups and downs that are going to cause a ton of stress, and it might be unnecessary. Yes, maybe you can end up with a few more dollars, but that might not be your goal. Maybe your goal is to say, can I make sure I preserve the power of my money, but also grow over time? Wonderful. That's most people. But you might be saying, you know what, I've been investing long enough that I know over time the market goes up. But you might be thinking to yourself, what if I retire at the wrong time, also known as sequence of return risk? Well, how do you protect against that? You have enough in conservative investments. You have enough in investments outpacing inflation over time. And so what we want to understand is a 4% return sufficient? Is a 5% return? 6%? 6% is a good starting place. That's what we use at our firm. But what we want to know is if we invest a little differently, is 7%, is that a reasonable return? I certainly think it is. However, you have to be willing to take certain ups and downs, and you might be saying, hey, I don't want that experience in retirement. Or you might be saying, Ari, I've been investing long enough. I know the market goes up over time. Certain years aren't going to be fun, but as long as I have enough in conservative investments, I don't have to worry. So when the market downturns, that I have cash I can go to, great. As a starting place, we always like to say, can we have 2.5 years of living expenses at all times? That's how much on average it takes in time for a market to recover, just to get back even. But that's a historical average. Does that help you in your retirement? It does, but we want to get more specific. So what we do is say, let's take an ultra conservative approach. Make sure you never run out of money. Let's double that. Let's assume you need 5 years of living expenses. So let's assume you want $100,000 per year. Assume you have $2 million. Well, now we want to make sure $500,000, that's in things like cash or bonds, or really just things that are going to be very invested in a conservative way, or not at all, so that when the market takes a downturn, you're not pulling from investments, paying taxes, and incurring a loss. So now you have 1.5 million that you want growing for you in this example. Well, that's wonderful. Now, one thing I want you to invite to think about is, does it make sense to take a little bit more of an aggressive portfolio today, knowing inflation over time makes a huge difference? And so what you want to think through is, if you want $100,000 per year in living expenses, well, let's assume you're invested in an aggressive way. And let's assume that market is going up and down, just like we know it does, just like you know it has done for many, many years. Well, you could look at that and say, I want $500,000 in cash so that no matter what's happening, I can pull from it, or bonds, or just a conservative investment. Or you could say, I have $2 million. I know the market goes up and down in the short term and it's not fun, but over time, I do outpace inflation, and I'm really maximizing what I've worked so hard for. So how can we make sure the most dollars are going to work? Well, that's about finding the balance, because does it make sense to have $200,000 or $300,000 in cash or conservative investments, with that $200,000 or that 1.7 to 1.8 in things growing for you? So it's saying, you know what, can we end up with more dollars in retirement? This is where it comes back to your goals. Check in with your goals. Is it to have a smoother ride? Or is it to say, can we make sure we leave as much as possible to our kids? Or can we make sure we spend as much as possible because we worked too hard for this money to not do that? There's not a right or wrong answer, but with inflation being what it is, remember that $100,000 per year, that average, well, now it's going to cost us $240,000 per year. By age 90, if we're averaging a 3% historical inflation rate, that's what we're up against in retirement. So I know this was a lot. Please, please, please share this video with someone who you think would benefit. If you found it helpful, please like this video, comment, and of course subscribe for more content like this.